Dr. Gladden, a lot of the men that are going to be listening to this believe that aging is nothing more than a slow decline that we just have to accept. But you argue that aging is optional and perhaps even preventable. So, what's the difference between anti-aging and true longevity, and why does it matter to every man listening over the age of 30?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the concept of longevity can be actually fairly abstract in the sense of what does it actually mean? For some people, it means we are going to age gracefully, and what does that actually mean? Well, it means, I think, making peace with loss, right? So that's not very attractive to me. But some people have that as their concept of longevity. Other people's concept is, I want to stay youthful and robust for as long as I can before I drop dead. But if I can do that in my 70s or my 80s or something, then that's my idea of longevity. Other people, it's I want to live to 120, I want to live to 380, I want to live 760. Other people, it's I don't ever want to die, the immortalists, if you will. So there's many different definitions of longevity out there, and I think the first thing for anybody to get in touch with is, what's your definition of longevity? Which target are you going for? And so in my world, what we've settled into is that when we're age 100 and beyond, and in some ways prior to that, is really targeting having a 30-year-old body um, and 300/3,000-year-old mind. And the reason I frame it up that way is because I think longevity actually represents the greatest opportunity humanity has ever had to really level up. Um, And, when you think about it, nobody that we know anyway has been at age 100 and had the youthfulness of a 30-year-old body, and yet the accumulated wisdom, insight, psychospiritual connection, relational repleteness, things like that, right? That really make life rich and vibrant. Nobody's ever had those two things put together. And what I'm excited about for longevity is that when we can do that, when we can have that youthful body and we can develop that 3,000-year-old mind and that sense of wisdom and perspective, I think it enables us to actually impact not only our families and our communities, but actually the entire planet from a different playing field, right? And so that's what gets me excited about longevity, and I think that is the target that we go for. So I don't know if that's clarifying to your audience or not, but if that resonates with them, it's something for you to at least entertain.
Yeah, I think that's a really good frame for a lot of things that we can dive into here today. And I love the idea of the 30-year-old body, but the 3,000-year-old mind. I've turned 42 a couple months ago, and as I may not feel as strong and powerful as I did when I was 30, because I'm not trying to train with the same level of strength and intensity. I was a competitive bodybuilder, and pursued a lot of really big strength goals in my late 20s and early 30s, like what some would say kind of impressive lifts. I don't have that power and strength, but in terms of the youthfulness of how I feel on a day-to-day basis, I have to tell you, I probably feel more young and vibrant at 42 than I did at 32. And I think a lot of it is the depth of my spirituality, the depth of my understanding of life and purpose and meaning. And I think that this is oftentimes maybe not something that is discussed in longevity conversation, is the role of our belief, our purpose, our spirituality. So how do you kind of see the integration of all of these things playing into this anti-aging longevity conversation?
Yeah, the way that we see it is that we have come to understand that aging is actually an exponential process. That people are going to age much more in their 70s and 80s than they are in their 20s and 30s, right? And we actually know that. I mean, if you look at your grandparents or your great grandparents or even your parents or whomever, right? You know that they're aging faster in those latter decades than they did when they were younger. And so the same is going to happen to us. The problem is that we have a difficult time relating to that. So we kind of think, oh, well, I'm 40, I'm 2, I'm 45, I'm 50, I'm 53, I'm 36. And the problem is we identify as I'm good for my age, right? Once you identify as being good for your age, you've already lost in our world. You've already acquiesced to the aging process. So I think what's really important um, is to not acquiesce to the aging process. And that's why we think it's so important to reference and identify with a or more youthful age, right? Um, so in my case, I was born in 1954, February of 1954. People can do the math, but I wake up 27 every day. And the reason I wake up 27 every day is because if I don't feel 27, then I ask myself, what do I need to do to get back to 27? Or if I feel better than I did at 27, then I pat myself on the back and say, well, maybe I should be shooting for 18, right? When I played soccer in college and was like probably in the, best aerobic shape of my life. Um, and so I think it's really, really important in this longevity quest to understand that aging is exponential and that we're handicapped in number one, seeing exponential aging all around us. But if we ask ourselves, what are we going to be like in 20 years? Right. Just everybody just ask yourself, what am I going to be like in 20 years? It's virtually impossible for us to imagine we're going to be any different than we are today. So we're in an exponential game that we have no real feel for. Right. And then as we go through life, we're coached by society that you shouldn't be doing this at this chronological age, and you shouldn't be doing that, and you should be doing this, and this is this, and that is that. Right. And so it's kind of baked into the system. Now you should retire, and now you should do this, now you should do that, now you shouldn't do this. So if you identify with your chronological age, it's the first step towards acquiescing to the aging process. And it's important to know that you're in an exponential game. And the problem with most longevity um, strategies, quite honestly, is that they're linear strategies to an exponential problem. So what I mean by that is that yes, it's good to eat better, exercise, work on your VO2 max, build some muscle, monitor your sleep, take the right vitamins, clean up your gut, cut down on your alcohol. All those things are super important. Cold plunge sauna, all the things we know have benefit. And yet everybody that has ever done that still got old, right? They still got old and died. They had a healthier lifespan. They had a longer health span, which is wonderful, but they still got old, right? So the problem is that most of the strategies that we talk about today are linear strategies to an exponential problem. And so it's very, very important for the listener to understand, hey, what age do I want to be for the rest of my life? And then claim that. Because I can tell you then in my world, being 27 now, I'm going to be 27 this decade, 28 the next, 29 the next, and I'll be 30 at 100. There have been times when I've woken up and I didn't feel anywhere close to 27. Some injury, some problem, a bike crash, busted up knee, some stuff like that. And it's like, gosh, is this when I have to give up on the idea that I'm actually 27? And every time that I've come to that, and I've had some existential moments in that question, I've doubled or tripled down on no, 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 no. I'm going to be 27. And then, what I learned in my own story was that in life you only get the answers to the questions that you're asking. So if you're asking the question, how do I stay 27? Those are the answers that you'll get. If you're asking the question, how do I be good for my age? Then those are the answers you'll get. But I think staying more youthful drives more innovation and more a better approach. It allows you to start to step into an exponential response to the exponential problem of aging. And I can map out more of that exponential response, but that would be an initial thought.
Yeah, I would love to for you to expand on, this idea of living at 27 and what that means from a, tactical metric kind of standpoint. Like, what are you monitoring, assessing? Obviously it starts with you asking these questions, but I'm sure there's real-time metrics that you're analyzing on a day-to-day basis. So if we're chronologically 71, if I did the math there correctly, but we biologically feel 27, like what are the metrics, and what are some of the things that the listeners, outside of the standard practices that you talked about, cellular, VO2 max, muscle, all these things, like let's tap into the metrics and measurements that you're using.
Right. Well, I think that's a great question. And let me preface it by saying that I think all of life boils down to one thing. And the one thing is actually optimizing our nervous systems. how we think, what we believe, the stories we tell ourselves, what we believe is possible, what we believe is not possible, how we move through space, right? What's our sense of proprioception, our sense of balance. We talk about strength, but actually, when we're in the gym, we're actually exercising the nervous system. The muscles are along for the ride, right? When you start lifting a weight, it's your nervous system that fires more strongly before the muscle hypertrophies. When you lose muscle mass as you age, it's because the nerve into that muscle fiber atrophies. It's not the muscle fiber atrophying. So it's really all about the nervous system. And as people age, they lose their balance, right? Their proprioception. They can't run down the stairs. So ways for me, simple ways that you can do at home. How fast can you run? Can you run 3 miles, right? Can you mountain bike? Can you snowboard? Can you keep up with your kids? Can you run down the stairs, right? If you can't do those things, then you've lost some of that youthfulness that you could do in your 20s, right? And so that's like a really easy gauge, right? Like I can still go for a run. I can mountain bike. I'm mountain biking better than I ever have. I started mountain biking in my 50s. I started snowboarding at 45. I think all those things, and I've done a lot of heli trips and snowcat trips and things like that, right? So it's for me, it's there's a very functional way apart from doing testing and everything else. Is can I just do anything that I want to do and do it well, right? And is my brain sharp? Can I think clearly? Is my memory good, right? And we have enough life experience to know when we're performing well and when we're not. So I think that's for me. That's kind of the bottom line is how well can you perform, and then we have many ways to quantitate all of that in our practice. Many ways. So, but I think that would be how I would think about it.
Yeah. Can you talk about the idea of or how you would see it, living on purpose? I was having a conversation with somebody over the weekend. I was down in Jupiter, Florida, for the holidays, and this woman is an estate manager for a very wealthy couple. Late into their 70s. I think the husband is 79, wife is 76, 77, and she's sharing. These two, much like you, live life on purpose. They're climbing mountains. They're scuba diving. They're helicopter rides. Like they're doing all these things to live on purpose. They've accumulated wealth so they can, get assistance in doing the menial tasks. She's like, she's never, she doesn't cook a dinner for herself. She doesn't clean her house. It's like they've, optimized life in a way that they do the things that they want to do. What role does this play, what I would call living on purpose?
Yeah, I think it's massive. Quite honestly, I think I alluded to 5 different circles that we have at Gladden Longevity that we think actually, when you put them together, create an exponential strategy. And so the first one is the life energy circle. Um, and the life energy circle is really the psycho spiritual space. And so you can imagine that as a circle that's going to bind the other ones together, right? The next circle is actually longevity. And the longevity circle is looking at something that is referred to as the hallmarks of aging. The hallmarks of aging are biological processes that are both the expression of aging and they're also the drivers of aging. And it's really important to understand that those hallmarks of aging, they all play with each other. So when one goes down, it pulls down another one, which pulls down another one, which pulls down another one. And so this is how the exponential decline occurs. These kind of spin up. There's about 16 of them in our world, 12 in other people's worlds, but we see about 16. Um, and as they spool up, it's like a tornado. It just gets faster and faster and faster. And that's why the exponential decline. So this is where most practices miss is that they don't focus on slowing down or unraveling or reversing the interplay between the hallmarks of aging. And so we have ways to test those and then we have ways to impact those directly. So that's really becomes the root cause of the root cause of everything, right? And then you've got medicine itself, health, if you will, every organ system and subsystem. This is what traditional medicine, functional medicine would deal with. Um, and so functional medicine has tools that traditional medicine doesn't have. So it's super useful. But it still can many times be sick care with additional tools focused on the problem. In our world, we can use those tools to pull somebody out of the hole, but then we use those tools to start to optimize those organ systems, right? So that's a different approach. And then the next circle is performance. So when I'm 100, I want to be fast, agile, strong, quick, balanced, great cardiovascular capacity, reserve, flexibility, right? So, and recovery. So if I'm going to do that at 100, then I need to do that today. And if I'm going to do that today, then I need to train those things. I need to train agility. I need to train quickness. I need to train speed, right? I need to train balance, static and dynamic balance. I need to train my nervous system to do those things. Um, and what we find is that, when you do train the nervous system conscientiously, oh my gosh, you can run down the stairs, right? And that's pretty fun. And then the fifth circle is really optimizing the four primary environments that we reside in, which is at home, at work, on business travel, and then on vacation. And architecting each of those four environments to essentially support the mission, to make it essentially as effortless as possible, to as frictionless as possible to stay on track and do what you want to do, exercise, eat what you want to eat, sleep where you want to sleep, those kinds of things, right? So and then kind of removing some of the toxins, whether it's mold and mercury, or whether it's toxic relationships, or whether it's the Twinkies in the cabinet and the pantry and the ice cream in the freezer, right? So if you get out the toxins, um, then that's a big step forward. And I will tell you about the ice cream in the freezer. If I have ice cream in my freezer at 8 o'clock at night, I'm going to eat it, right? It's not like I'm Superman. I just have to architect the environment to support the mission and not put it there in the first place. So this is kind of how we think. But when you loop all five of those together, and then you understand that you can identify levers that reside on each one of those circles that really are important to pull or activate, and the timing and the sequence and the frequency intensity with which to pull them, now you're actually starting to create an exponential response to an exponential problem. And then you have feedback loops with wearables and repeat testing and all that sort of thing. So for us, if you're going to win, you also, inside that construct, you have to have knowledge of your genetics. And so many people just have solutions, right? It's like, well, come to us and we're going to do this for you and we're going to do that for you. Well, what we find is that there are many curtains to be pulled back before you actually make a recommendation. Um, and for example, we had a 35-year-old guy from Puerto Rico come in. We have people from all over that come in to work with us. We did a glucose tolerance test for him. His blood sugar was normal, right? He controlled it. But behind the curtain, his insulin level shot way up. So he's got insulin resistance that he didn't know about and would not have been picked up with a continuous glucose monitor, right? And so it's this idea for us of deconstructing the individual thoroughly through their genetics, through biological testing, chemical testing, biometric testing, to actually deeply understand the individual, even psycho-emotional testing, right? Looking at the nervous system, how stressed is it? Um, because once we understand what's going on and we know the genetics, now all of a sudden we have numerous levers we can pull. And when you have more levers to pull, you can get people better results. So I just had a call with this guy. He's just on top of mine, and in 9 weeks, he's made like tremendous progress, right? So he's coming back in to do some follow up testing, a few add on things, and we'll go on down the road. But this is not uncommon for us. We find that many times people have been other places and things have been missed or misdiagnosed, right? So it's really a big deal. I could go on with examples of that, but the idea is that it's this deconstruction process to deeply understand someone and then putting them across the five circles that enables us to define things. Now, back to your original question, purpose. So in the life energy circle, um, you know, the first thing is a growth mindset. And for us, we've heard that term, but what does it mean? Well, for us, it's, are you married to your questions or are you married to your answers? And we go through life feeling like it's our duty, our intent, our responsibility to find our answers. But all answers have a shelf life. And really, I think it's our duty to find our questions. Even if we firmly believe in something, it's going to be the questions around that belief that drive the progress. How do I be more spiritual? How do I be more like Jesus? How do I be whatever I'm going to do? It's the questions that drive the progress. So it's really not about finding the answers as much as it is finding the questions, right? So in our practice, we have five related to longevity, which is number one, how good can I be, right? Global question. How do we make 100 the new 30, which is a book I wrote, 100 is the new 30. How do we live well beyond 120? How do we crack something called the Hayflick limit, where telomeres get short and cells can no longer divide? How do we actually live well past the Hayflick limit? And then how do we live young for a lifetime? How do we maintain a very youthful, curious mind, right? When you're 5 years old and a kid goes by you on a scooter, it's like, hey, I want to try that, right? But when people are 50 and somebody goes by on a scooter, it's like, no, I don't think I want to do that. Because we've basically been coached through our schooling that our value comes from being competent. And if we are approached with something that's novel that we know we're not going to be quote unquote good at, we shy away from it because our identity is now tied up as being competent. When in actual fact, a youthful mindset, a curious mindset says, no, I want to try that, right? I don't know how to do it, but I'm not afraid to fail. There is no failure. I'm only learning. And it's that youthful mindset that enables us to stay young and keep the nervous system young and the brain young, right? So living young for a lifetime. And then the last one is how do we develop a 300-year-old mind, which is really optimizing the life energy circle. So those are the questions that we ask. Then we move on to mental health. I think mental health comes down to all of us have been traumatized at some point, some way, and we end up living in reaction to those traumas. Right now, we're all on tilt. Now we're all walk into a room on tilt. Right? It's like a poker player that lost six hands or whatever. Right? They're on tilt. Everybody on the table knows it. You can tell when somebody walks in. You read their energy. You know they're on tilt, or you know they're not on tilt. Right? And so one of the duties or I think tasks in this 3,000-year-old mind is to actually identify, okay, what were the traumas? What actually happened here? What did somebody do? What did I do? What am I responsible for? What are they responsible for? And it's possible to heal those traumas when we can actually forgive everybody involved, including ourselves. Once we forgive ourselves and the other people, it's like, okay, now we can move on. But what's forgiveness, right? Because that's an interesting term we all use, right? I forgive you. I don't know what just happened. I'm not sure what happened. For me, forgiveness is really, you and I right now have basically unconditional positive regard for each other, right? So there's positive regard flowing back and forth. Now, if something were to happen where trust was violated or something like that, then we tend to pull up a barrier and say, well, I'm not going to allow unconditional positive regard to flow to that person. And if they're trying to send it to me, I'm not sure I want to receive it. Right. And holding up that psychic barrier takes energy. It takes psychic energy. So we're actually paying a price to live in reaction to that. Forgiveness for me is taking the barrier down and saying, I may not be friends with that person. I may not ever see them again, but from my heart, I'm going to allow unconditional positive regard to flow to them. And if they're sending it to me, I'm going to gratefully receive it. And that's forgiveness. So now, once you've forgiven everyone involved, including yourself, then you can move to the next stage, which is transcendence. And when you transcend the trauma, you now become grateful for everything that ever happened to you because it's made you wiser. It's made you more empathetic. It's made you more able to put yourself in another person's shoes and show love under certain conditions and whatever else, right? So now all of a sudden we're developing a 3,000-year-old mind, and we can't get there without trauma if we know how to actually leverage it into transcendent wisdom, right? So this is part of it too. And then it goes into great relationships. What's the definition of a great relationship? Well, to know and be known and to love and be loved, right? That's pretty much it. To know and be known and to love and be loved. And that takes courage. It takes vulnerability. It takes the ability to have curious and courageous conversations with your partner. Hey, this is on my heart. I'm not sure how you're going to hear this. This may end the relationship, but I need to share it with you, right? Because in relationships, we tend to try to maintain the status quo. So we sweep stuff under the rug, which ultimately leads to resentment, which is actually the acid in the garden. So what you'd want to do instead is actually bring those things forward. If you're working with somebody that can hear that and go back and forth, you can build intimacy and understanding and knowing, and love will grow like, Jack and the Beanstalk. So that's really what you're going for. So these are all things that are part of the life energy circle: self love, wisdom, and then safety is a big one also, right? Because when you understand there's nothing external to you that can make you feel safe, no amount of money, no job, no family, no country, everything can be taken away. History's shown us that over and over, everything can be taken away. So then where does your safety come from, right? And where does unconditional love for yourself come from? Both of those are inside jobs. And once you're able to align yourself with source, with God, and feel safe no matter what, once you have unconditional love because you know that ultimately you are love and you are lovable, then it's like, oh, okay, I'm feeling pretty good here. And then from there, you can then lean into, okay, what's my purpose for being here? What's my purpose? And as I've gone through this whole process through my life, what I've discovered is that my purpose is really, in fact, the meaning of life. Let's go in the deep end. I think the meaning of life is, when you really get in touch with God directly, or source, or however people want to relate to it, it's pure love. It's pure, pure love. And what does love love to do? Well, it loves to create. And what's the feedback loop on creation, right? Because we have this multiverse of creation going on. What's the feedback loop? Well, it's joy. So it's love creating joy. And that's my meaning for life. It's also become my purpose, from a loving place to create joy. I'm on this podcast with you from a loving place to create joy for you, for your listeners, and for myself. And so that all of a sudden now you have purpose, right? Now you have the ability to be what I call unencumbered from prior traumas, right? So that you can bring all of your gifts forward from an unencumbered place. And that's what a 3,000-year-old mind looks like: unencumbered, you know, fully expressed in all your gifts, and with a strong sense of purpose, and continuing to grow with a youthful mind, an ability to jump on a scooter, love deeply, grow deeply, ask good questions, ask better questions. This is what it's all about. So that's how we think.
I got to tell you, Dr. Gladden, this is not anywhere near the direction I thought our conversation was going to go. I'm going to go ahead and put my outline kind of off the charts here, because we're going in what I think is way more important conversations than some of the things I had looking to discuss with you. I want to stay on this topic of questions though, because I think it was Tony Robbins said the quality of your life will be dictated by the quality of your questions. You gave us 5 questions here that you walk your clientele through, but prior to somebody coming to you, they're obviously down a quest and journey themselves, trying to figure some of these things out. What are the questions that people are asking themselves before they find you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, no pun intended. Um, so the question that people are asking could be anything, right? And so, but we characterize building out a program for them based on the questions that they're asking. So, for example, someone's asking, how do I deal with my depression? How do I deal with my eating disorder? How do I deal with my busted up knee? How do I deal with my shoulder? How do I deal with my gut? How do I deal with my hormones being off? How do I deal with, my sexual function and libido not being up to par? How do I deal with my heart condition? I'm an interventional cardiologist by training, right? So, how do I rebuild my memory in my brain? I just had a concussion. It's so those questions. People will come in, and then what we do is we apply the deconstruction process to really understand the genetics, the physiology, the biometrics, all of it. And then it's like, oh, okay, well, here are the levers we can pull to get your brain back, and then we have all the tools to do that. So, and then from there, people are like, okay, great, I'm out of the hole. Now I'm either great, thank you very much, and I'm going to go about my life, or you know what, I'd like to see how good I can be. And it's like, oh, okay, now you're starting to ask one of our overarching questions, and now we can lean into that, right? So, yeah, that's how that works.
What role is AI playing, and where do you see it going in the future? And staying on the discussion and maybe linking it back to the questions there as well. We're obviously living in what many would say is the greatest time, right? We have access to more information than ever. Artificial intelligence is rapidly growing. A lot of people now are starting to offload and outsource even their thinking and questionings to AI. So there's a danger, I'm sure, where somebody can go in the wrong direction. But I know you talk about it from a way that we can optimize and utilize some of these technology and the advancements of AI. So where do you currently see it sitting? Where are people using it incorrectly, and where's it going in the next 5 to 10 years when it comes to AI and technology?
Yeah, I think AI can be a tool for good or a tool for bad. It can either be very directive or misdirective, right? And so, again, I think what helps anybody navigate their way through that is to know what their overarching target is. Like, if I know my overarching target is a 3,000-year-old mind and a 30-year-old body, then I'm going to reject things that come back and say, well, for your age, you should be doing this, right? I'm going to reject that. Um, and I think what I found with AI is that it's incredibly helpful. But what's really, really critical to get what you want from it is to identify who you want it to speak as. So, for example, before you put in a prompt, which is essentially a question for the most part, if you're not asking for it to comment on something, which is also an in question, an implied question, I instruct it who I want it to be. Like, as a functional medicine, regenerative medicine, longevity medicine expert, talk to me about this. And then I'll either put in a topic or something very specific, right? Like, I don't know, a particular amino acid in a, in a chain of, uh, reactions or something, right? And in this context, tell me a little bit about when this is elevated or not. And then I find it gives me very, very good answers. Now, to tell where AI is going, we've been working with AI actually for the last 5 years. And we have AI throughout our practice. We're actually building an app called the Longevity Wingman that should be out early next year. That is a multi agentic AI that's built around the 5 circles I outlined that people can put their data into, and it'll all be HIPAA compliant. And we can coach them. We can't practice medicine, but we can coach them in a way to take the friction out of them trying to optimize their health and longevity. So I think AI is actually going to accelerate progress. And I think it's really going to, what you want to do in whatever job you're doing, and our job is no different, is AI will be as good or better than we are at what it knows. And now it becomes a question of, are you the conductor or are you, the passenger? So rather than being the technician, what we are is we're building things to direct AI in ways that we want it to work with us and with clients to optimize things better. So you always want to be the conductor. And I think if you're the conductor of that orchestra, then you have a job going forward. If you're answering phone calls with 10 potential answers, that job's gone, right? So that's kind of how I see it. I also see it this way. I think that, I don't know if you've been keeping track of the quantum computing space. Have you kept track of that at all? Not a ton. Okay, so Google has their Willow chip, uh, and Microsoft has their Maharana chip. Um, there's another chip that's used at CERN, which is basically the particle collider over in Switzerland. They have a big quantum computer. IBM has a quantum computer also. And what's happening when they're using these quantum computers, and what is quantum computing? How's it different? Well, instead of ones and zeros, you have a quantum state, which is a one and a zero, but it's everything simultaneously between one and zero. So think of it as a quarter, and it's if laying on the table, it's either heads or tails. So it's binary. It's heads or tails. When you flip it in the air and it's spinning, it's everything simultaneously. It's neither head nor tails. That's what a quantum computer is. So it's the qubit is between 0 and 1, and it's everything, right? And it's everything until you ask the question. And then because of entanglement, where it can be entangled with other bits, it has the ability to massively parallel process. So instead of sequentially trying solutions to a problem, and a fast computer can try solutions very quickly, it can try millions of solutions simultaneously from these flipping quarters. And what that does is it enables you to optimize things very quickly. So, in other words, the Willow chip solved in 5 minutes what would take every computer on Earth longer than the universe has been around to solve the same problem, right? So massive computing power. Now, the other thing that quantum computing does is it finds signal in the middle of noise. So you can have a lot of noise coming in. And the question is, well, is there any signal in there, anything that we can figure out? Well, the quantum computer is very good at finding signal inside the noise. So all of a sudden, you can look at a mass of health data and it can find the relationships that your other computers couldn't see. So now you have something that can find signal in the middle of noise and something that can parallel process potential solutions million times, millions and millions of times quicker than we could otherwise, right? So I think when we start to apply that to optimizing my health, your health, the listener's health, we're actually going to solve aging in about a weekend because it's so powerful that once it's unleashed on that topic, I think it's over very quickly. In fact, I think aging is going to be solved in the next 2 years. Everybody talks about 2030 or 2035 or whatever. People are missing out on just how exponentially explosive quantum computing is. So once that stuff comes online for healthcare, we're trying to get ourselves in the middle of that. I think we're going to solve aging, and then it's going to come back to the question of purpose. Why do you want to be here? So yeah,
We've had Dave Asprey on the show a couple of times. I don't know if you're familiar with Dave's work. He's gone out pretty public and talked about we discussed this 4 or 5 years ago when it was really the big topic for him was living towards 180. You've mentioned here 120 being the new 30 here. Solving aging like in your idea or your mind. Where do you see the potential for lifespan going? Like, is it something where I don't want to say we become immortal, or do we, if we have the purpose and then the synergisty of these five circles?
yeah. I think I think biologically we will probably um, be able to live as long as we want. I think we'll do that. I don't know that we'll become immortal, but I think particularly if we have the ability to regrow organs and rejuvenate ourselves and do these kinds of things. I think in many respects, we can probably live as long as we want. The question becomes, do you have a reason to want to do that? And and that's the big one, right? And particularly, the world is changing very rapidly. And so I don't know if you've seen, but back in the 70s, MIT predicted that society would end in 2040 based on all the different parameters that they calculated. MIT recalculated that about a year ago, and they're predicting again that society will end in 2040. Because and here's the problem for humans is that our technologies have far outstripped our wisdom. Right. So we have quantum computers, which, if they're used in a malicious way, right, can disrupt everything, steal everybody's bank accounts, whatever, and then you've got crazy people in the world that have their, finger on the trigger of nukes. And so, and you've got social media basically distracting everybody to the point that nobody's really dating anymore. Childbirths are falling. Many countries are really suffering with a lack of childbirth. Even the Russians, the Koreans, the Japanese, the Italians, all those populations are plummeting, and even in the U.S., birth rates have gone down. Right, so it's we have many ways to implode as a society. So this is why I think the 3,000-year-old mind and 100-year-old or a 30-year-old body enables us to have the wisdom to actually start to navigate beyond that and sort of save ourselves from ourselves so we can actually live into a brighter future. So that's kind of on a big scale.
Yeah, I think most of the Western countries are below replacement rate when it comes to the birth rate. And this conversation here can be very very, very daunting and stressful. And I think social media plays into this. I think the algorithm are built in a way that they're designed to create chaos. Negativity fuels anger in people, and the average person spending 6 plus 8 hours a day tapped into these devices, right? So when it comes to the managing of this nervous system, the world is working against you. So what do you call for people to do, right? Obviously, these things are real. We need to be aware of them, but they're also working against some of the things we're talking about here.
Yeah, it's a really great question, right? So obviously, I spend a fair amount of time running things down, right? Because I'm eternally curious, is what it boils down to. And I want to know about this. I want to know, oh, that's interesting. I want to know about that. Um, And yet, my home base is to go into a very deep meditative state, right? It's a theta state, and we use something called brain tap.
Dr. Patrick Porter, yeah.
Yeah, Patrick Porter, right? Binaural beats and photobiomodulation to actually entrain your brain into these deep states for relaxation. And we have ways in the clinic here to measure the balance between your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system and how much power you have in that nervous system to control yourself. And it turns out that VO2 max is a great predictor of longevity. If everybody knows about that, we don't have to reaccount that. But another one is actually how much power do you have in your vagus nerve? Because if you have a lot of power there to control and regulate, right, you can stay calm in the midst of chaos. And that decreases the aging pace dramatically, right? So I think it's super important to, again, focus on the nervous system here. Um, and ultimately, that's kind of the bottom line. So anyway, I will say this: there's been an interesting insight that I've had recently. Probably your audience can relate to this. Many of us spend our time efforting, right, trying to do stuff, trying to make it happen, trying to do this, trying to meet somebody else's expectations. Whatever it is, we're efforting, right, at home, at work. Um, the thing that's really enabled me to flip that on its head to where it goes from being stressful to actually being an exercise and relaxation is that in every situation I go into, instead of efforting, I go into receive. So in this podcast, there's no effort on my part. I'm here to receive, right? And if the audience will try that just as a mental exercise, go into a place of just receiving. What you'll find is that it takes you into the present moment, right? Because when you're efforting, you're always thinking about the past and the future. When you're there to receive, you receive in the present moment. You don't receive in the future, you don't receive in the past, you receive now. So when I'm just here to receive, now all of a sudden it makes me very, very present. And that's the key, being very present, being calm. And then you're able to, like a ninja, deal with what comes from that place of receiving. So there are many, many things. This is part of getting to a 3,000-year-old mind, right? So again, training your nervous system. Yeah.
When did this shift for you? I know you mentioned here your first half of your career, I think you built a very successful practice in cardiology. And then I believe your health began to fall apart. You experienced a lot of the things that, the modern man is struggling with: fatigue, brain fog, struggles with your weight there as well. Was there a defining moment where some of these things like radically shook you in your wake up call? And what was that journey that kind of led you down this path here?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, yeah, I practiced interventional cardiology for 25 years here in Dallas, and I built my own heart group. We had 10 offices, 12 docs, flew around in a little A36 Bonanza. I started cath labs and heart attack programs and outlying hospitals and things. And then I co founded what's become a nationally recognized heart hospital here in Dallas with another cardiologist and the people at Baylor. And then I've been involved with medical device companies, and I still sit on the board of one as a kind of a, you know, legacy activity, if you will. But what happened to me in my 50s was I got sick. I got a lot of stuff going on. I'm exhausted all the time. I'm putting on weight. I can sleep 2, 3 nights well in a row, and I'm still exhausted, right? And I also was noticing brain fog. And when I would become stressed, I would actually go over a cliff of depression. Not like, oh, I'll go for a run and I'll feel better, but I mean, like, I just want out of here kind of depression. So, and I'd struggled with depression previously in my life. I almost took my life at one point. And so I'm concerned about all this. And so I go in and I'm tested by one of my colleagues. And what I'm told is, all your labs check out for your age. You're just getting older. Why don't you take an antidepressant? Right. So anyway, it's such an existential moment for me. It's like, really? It's all downhill from here. Right. And my dad died with dementia. And so I'm like, no, I don't think so. I'm not going to accept that. That's when I threw myself into the functional integrative age management medicine space. It took me 2.5 years to figure everything out, but I figured it all out, right? Subclinical hypothyroidism, a DIO2 gene that doesn't enable me to convert inactive thyroid to active thyroid in my brain. I don't methylate well, so I don't make certain neurotransmitters, which can impact my memory, um, and also my mood. So I got on the right combination of supplements for that, right? And then I was testosterone DHEA depleted, which is kind of common story now, but back then it was a little more novel. And then learning to actually manage the hormones safely, where you're looking at urine metabolites and not just trying to optimize testosterone, realizing that men need estrogen too, and making all that balance, right? So I did all that, and 2.5 years later, I'm like, you know what? I've been practicing sick care, man. This is healthcare. I can't do this anymore. I don't want to have those sick care conversations anymore. I want to help optimize health and then ultimately longevity. So I base jumped out of cardiology in 2012, and I've never looked back. I knew how to make a living over there, right? Like a very good living. And then I didn't have any idea how to make a living. I went 4.5 years without a paycheck, but I had other sources of revenue, of course, from other investments. But the point is, I have gone all in on this, right? And we are 100% committed to cracking the code on aging. And that's why we're constantly looking for new solutions, new sources, no deeper understanding, quantum computing. How do we leverage it? How do we, all these things, right? So I wake up excited every day because it's like, oh my gosh, we're on a big adventure here. Yeah.
A lot of things we've been talking about here today are the spiritual mindset, belief, the question asking side of things. I'm assuming though that there's going to be some biohacking tools, obviously technologies that are being utilized, peptides, stem cell therapies, hormones is obviously a rapid growing marketplace. How are you guys integrating the use of the newer biohacking technologies, peptides, stem cell therapies, and hormones?
So we've been using peptides since like 2018 here. So I was one of the first people that got trained in the use of peptides in the United States. So we've been doing that for a long time. We've been using stem cells for a long time, probably since 2019 or 20. We have a way to do that legally here in the US. Um, we also have access to cord blood and placental rejuvenation tissues, right? That have exosomes and messenger RNAs and other signaling molecules that can actually, help. If a baby breaks a leg, it heals perfectly, right? If they get a cut, it heals perfectly. So you're getting those kinds of healing factors on top of the other things. And then what we found is that in order to rejuvenate things, stem cells are like Olympic swimmers, right? But if you've got a swimming pool that's full of lawn chairs and tree branches, they're not going to do very well, right? So as we age, we accumulate lawn chairs and tree branches in the pool. And so you've got to clean that out with plasmapheresis or several rounds of plasmapheresis. And then 5-day fast mimicking diets and increasing autophagy and all the different things that go into cleaning out the pool. Once you clean out the pool, now you can put in the Olympic swimmers with all the support systems, including the peptides and the hormone optimization and the ozone therapy and the NAD and all the things that boost mitochondrial function. And we have peptides for that. And it's really it's a recipe, right? It's not, oh, we've got a thing. We do PRP. No, it's actually you have a whole system about how you orchestrate these together to make everything work, and then that's how we go about the rejuvenation side. Yeah.
What does your day personal look like as a 27-year-old man? What are some of the do's? Is there a structured morning routine that you're walking through when it comes to your spiritual practices, your health, nutrition, exercise regimens, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah. Well, let's start with 27-year-old man. So sex plays a big part in it, right? Because men that ejaculate more frequently have a lower prostate cancer risk, 20 times a month or more. So a lot of people are on this semen retention, kick or whatever. I know Dave Asprey was on that for a while. And then I gave a talk right after he did and said, I'm not sure that's really the right thing because prostate cancer risk is for real, right? So I think we're actually being sexually active and having a good erectile function is actually a good metric of how good is your cardiovascular system, how good is your libido and your hormone optimization, right? So actually I'm kind of teasing, but sexual activity is important. Then my daily routine is actually to wake up and I journal first thing. I have a gratitude journal. So 3 things I'm grateful for, a couple things that would make today great, and then a couple affirmations about myself, right? How I'm going to show up today. Um, and I finish the rest of it not at night, but the following morning, which is 3 things that went well today that I'm grateful for. Um, And so I start with that. And then many times, like today, I went downstairs and did a VASPER, which is a blood flow restriction interval training device. It's a 21-minute protocol. So I get some good cardio that way, but I also get good blood flow restriction. So if you're familiar with blood flow restriction, it really boosts growth hormone release, keeps your muscle mass strong, bone density up, and it also is training your muscles to work in hostile environments. So I love to mountain bike. I like to do stuff like that. So when I'm doing Vassar and then jump on the mountain bike, it's like I'm on a motorcycle, right? So that's pretty fun. So I did Vassar with brain tap on. So I'm in theta state for 21 minutes. And instead of efforting, I'm receiving from the machine. I'm training my nervous system to receive in every context, right? Then from there, I went up and took a shower, got dressed, came to work, and then I jumped into some phone calls. There were a couple of situations that needed some attention. A particular molecule didn't show up on time for a client that was here. Another client who flew in from Ohio. Another guy from San Francisco we're working with had some questions, jumped on a call with him and kind of mapped out the next stages for him. He's struggling with psoriasis and kidney failure that the Kaiser doctors treated him with nonsteroidals and bumped off his kidneys. Now they're talking about dialysis. We're trying to pull him out of that fire. And then I talked with the guy from Puerto Rico I mentioned earlier. So, all this kind of moving from thing to thing. Meanwhile, I'm researching, new therapies, new cancer therapies, and things like that we're interested in. And then I did a podcast this morning with one of my clients who had um, lost her husband a few years ago and went through a deep depression. Found a widow coach in the UK who basically got her off the floor back into her life. Then she found me on a podcast and bought the book, then implemented a bunch of stuff, started teaching people around her things from 100 is a new 30, then joined as a client. Now she's physically doing great and psychospiritually doing great, back running her business. And so the podcast was, from ground zero all the way back to life is good again, right? So it's they're interesting days, right? So yeah.
It's amazing. No, I appreciate all of that. I'm curious with the blood flow occlusion training. Are you where are you restricting?
On my thighs, it's yeah, blood flow restriction. My thighs and my bicep, tricep. So yeah, so that's it's. Imagine you're sitting in a reclining new step, right, where you've got arm pedals that are going back and forth, and your feet are going back and forth, right, and they're synchronized. So you're not going to get hurt there. And then you put on the cuffs, and then there's a program you're walking through. And I did one. You can customize the programs. I do one called Monster, which is not easy, but very gratifying. And when I go into receptive mode and go into that meditative state, I find my outputs are actually greater and faster than if I'm trying. Right? We think that we've kind of come to believe that if we try harder, that's the path forward, but it's not. It's actually to receive and go into a flow state. That's actually the path forward. So.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. I think I mentioned at the beginning. I spent a short decade plus in the bodybuilding world and occlusion training. I mean, going back to 2013, 2014, I think Dr. Lane Norton was one of the early adopters that was really pushing that from the scientific field. You mentioned the book a handful of times here. Tell the guys, out there where they can find it. Obviously, who you wrote it for, and then where they can connect with you, learn more about the work, the coaching, the institute, if they're interested in maybe going a little bit deeper into things that you guys are doing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So the book is 100 is the New 30. The subtitle is How Playing the Symphony of Longevity Will Enable Us to Live Young for a Lifetime. So the symphony is really that sequence with which you're pulling those levers, right? And then that's on Amazon. It's 450 pages. I wrote every word myself. And then I read the entire book on Audible. So if you like Audible, a lot of people like the Audible copy of it. It's also on Audible. And then I have a podcast called the Gladden Longevity Podcast. We've got over probably 220 episodes now, something like that. We're not quite where you are, but we cook along at a pretty good pace. So you can find us there. And then there's social media stuff that people post that I just create content. I never actually look at it, just so you know, but that's out there. And then the website is gladdenlongevity.com. And so you can get access. If you want to just see everything we have, that's the place to go, gladdenlongevity.com. And if you want to reach out to us, you can reach out there and we can have a consultation with you about, what questions you're asking and then how we can, develop a program to deconstruct your situation and get you the right solutions. So, yeah.
Incredible. Guys, we'll have all of Dr. Gladden's and the Institute's links and plug down there in the show notes, website, Instagram's podcast, link to the book directly there on Amazon there as well. As I told you, not the direction I thought we were going to go here today, but man, this has been one hell of a ride and conversation. And I know I've enjoyed every single minute of it. And I know the audience will as well. We like to end all of the conversations though with the same and final question. The title of our podcast is called The Superhuman Life. And, this has become a big part of kind of my life's work and mission and journey and kind of unpacking and uncovering and kind of defining what to me it means live a superhuman life. And I love to get the guest take. So as we wrap up today's conversation with this living as a 30-year-old in a 3,000-year-old mind, Dr. Gladden, how would you define living a superhuman life?
I would define it that way. I would define it just that way. Youthful body, a really well-developed psycho-spiritual space. That to me would be superhuman, um, because it allows us to move into a transcendent space from which we can actually impact the planet in such a good way. And the planet needs people that are operating at that level to help, I think. So yeah, that would be it for me.
Yeah. I don't know if you've read the book Power versus Force, but I think our conversation runs a lot in line with what Hawkins is talking about in there. We need these people operating in the right.
Yeah, from love, quite honestly, which is the highest vibration, right? So, yeah, from a loving place, creating joy. So this turns out to it. I didn't copy him, but it turns out that that's kind of at the top of his scale as well. So yeah,
Yeah. And a lot of people will tell you God is love, and first book of the Bible will tell you we're created in God's image. And I think you brought that here today, the conversation. So I've enjoyed every moment of it. Guys, check out Dr. Gladden, his book, his podcast, link down there in the show notes below. But Jeff, man, I appreciate your time. It's been an absolute honor. Thank you so much for everything you shared here today. Guys, as always, we appreciate you hanging out here with us. Rate, review. We just found out here earlier today we were ranked in the top 10 podcast across all of Spotify. It's because you guys are out there rating, sharing these episodes with as many people as possible. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for the support. But let's continue to grow this and let's make it into the top 1% in 2026. As always, guys, we appreciate you. We'll see you in the next one.